All right, let's go ahead and get started here. We may still have a few people joining us, but I'm very excited to see all of you here to learn more about Ford Fellowships. My name is Matt Kloppenstein. I'm a National Fellowship Coordinator for graduate students in the National Fellowships and Scholar Programs office here. And I'm very excited to have Dr. Yvette Hewitt with us from UNC Charlotte, who is going to be sharing with us more about Ford Fellowships. So I'm going to give a brief introduction and then allow Dr. Hewitt to present about Ford Fellowships and then answer the questions that you might have about applying for one of the Ford Fellowships here. But Dr. Hewitt is a professor of kinesiology and the director of Advanced Faculty Affairs and Diversity Office at UNC Charlotte. She is a biomedical researcher whose research focuses on the role of estrogen in immune function and liver disease, as well as the effects of neonatal exposure to environmental estrogens on adult disease and the roles of nitric oxide in early pregnancy. She is a former Ford Fellow, a reviewer for Ford, and a liaison for the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program. And I'm very excited to be able to have her here today, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So please, Dr. Hewitt, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I have to admit that, being on Zoom all the time has been an interesting thing, but it has actually made it easier to share what we do with the Ford Foundation with other people. So I'm really grateful that we've learned to use the technology to do that. I'm excited to tell you about the Ford program. I'm going to share my screen with all of you so that you can see what I'm going to be talking about. So the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program is actually administered by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And they are really great in that they provide a PowerPoint to go over all the different items. As you heard, I'm the North Carolina liaison. I am a former Ford Fellow, although we like to say that once a 40, you're always a 40. I do attend the conference as a senior fellow to help run some of the sessions and do one-on-one advising. And so once you become a Ford Fellow, that's one of the differences between the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program and other fellowships that you can get. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. The goals of this fellowship is to increase the diversity of the United States college and university faculty by increasing ethnic racial diversity and maximizing the benefits of an education of diversity, and really increasing the number of professors who can and will use diversity as a resource for enriching the education of all students. Like the National Science Foundation, the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program used to be a minority fellowship program. It is now using diversity as a resource. So, but there are certain things about when you are reviewed that are really important to understand, and important to understand about why the fellowship is different, right? So then if you are applying to a National Science Foundation, for instance, fellowship program or Mellon. The benefits are going to vary by the different stipend level. It will vary by whether it's a pre-doc level, a dissertation level, or a postdoc level fellowship, but all fellows get to go to the Conference of Ford Fellows. The difference is that number of conferences that the fellowship office will support you for depends upon how much money is coming from the Ford Foundation. So it used to be you got 3 trips to a conference. And then now I believe it's 2. And so, but I'm not exactly sure. I have to admit, I don't know if it's 2 throughout the time that you're on fellowship, or if it's 2 consecutive ones. I need to find that out if anyone has a question about that. I just realized I'm not actually sure about that. You have access to regional liaisons. You actually have access to a huge network of senior Ford Fellows. But there are regional liaisons all across the country. I am the North Carolina liaison. I'm not actually the South Carolina liaison. The South Carolina liaison is actually the Georgia and South Carolina liaison, but we've never understood why, since Charlotte is way closer to many of the schools in South Carolina. So we've sort of do double duty in South Carolina. And we also have a Ford Fellows Listserv. The Ford Fellows Listserv has over 1,600 current and former Ford Fellows on it. It's a place where you can, see postings for jobs, fellowships, articles, discussions about, if you have a question, you can post it. People will post things and say, I'm wanting to apply to this particular fellowship program. Can anyone talk to me about it if you ever applied? So we've had this fellow listserv for about since the early 1990s now. And I'm actually the listserv owner. So if you were to get a Ford Fellowship, you'd see my name on a bunch of different emails that come through. And then you also have access, everyone has access to the directory of Ford Fellows. And so your name goes up there, and across the country, people will look at that Fellows directory to see if there are people that they can send emails to and contact about potential jobs. And so that's always available through the National Academy's website. As I said, you get to go to the conference, and I will tell you that this piece and the networking piece are what make being a Ford Fellow unique in my mind, and also help support you in your career from the time you get a fellowship. The fellows at the conference get to network with other fellows, those that are also currently on fellowship primarily, but also senior Ford Fellows that are there helping run the conference. There is the opportunity to have face-to-face conversations with university and academic presses. So if you are in a discipline that you have to publish a book, that you have access to those folks to talk about what it is you have to do when you get to that point. We have one-on-one mentoring. We have all kinds of different workshops that have to do with career advancement, that are sometimes specific to a pre-doc, a postdoc, somebody that's doing their dissertation, early career. We have all kinds of career type workshops, but we also have things about, what if you balancing your life and career? What if you have a disability? What is it like to have a specific identity in academia? And people will have conversations around that as well. And then talking about things that have to do with being just a graduate student or a postdoc in terms of just how hard it might be and what do you need to know to navigate that. There are strategies like completing the dissertation, getting your papers published, things like that, and then really planning an academic career. I can tell you that I would not be where I am now if it wasn't for the Ford Foundation Fellowship, because I got to meet people at this conference. And I'm old. I've been I was a 1989, I think, dissertation fellow. So when I first started my academic career, there weren't support structures and I started at UNC Charlotte. There weren't support structures at UNC Charlotte for new faculty. I had no idea what I was doing. My family is from Mexico. No one had gone, other than my siblings, had gone to college. Nobody else was an academic. And I didn't really understand it. And I didn't know enough to know the kinds of questions I should be asking. I just made assumptions, and people made assumptions about what I knew. And I happened to be at one of the conferences and was presenting. There's also disciplinary sections, and you get to present your research if you're selected. And I was presenting my research, and a person I did not know came up to me afterwards and said, "That was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. We're kind of in the same area. When you come up for promotion and tenure, you should put my name down as a reviewer." And I looked at this man and I said, "As a reviewer?" And he said, "Girl, do you not know how this works?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And he said, "We need to go sit down and talk." And he sat down and explained to me how an academic career works. No one had ever told me any of that before. I was at a different kind of institution. I had done my graduate work at a medical center. So there was nothing like what UNC Charlotte was where I came from, and I didn't understand how it worked. And so he made it possible. And I learned a whole lot of things from so many Ford Fellows along the way. And many of them are my academic, cheerleaders and, mentors every single day. So the conference really gives you that opportunity, as does the listserv, to reach out, meet people, and have them help you, sponsor you, mentor you, and just be friends and understand the struggles that happen in academia. And so you also have these other opportunities. As I said, I gave a presentation. We have posters every year. You get to hear plenary speakers come and talk about their work and how what they may be doing. So there's three fellows every year come and talk about their research, and then we have national scholars that come in and talk about a variety of different things related to being in academia. So that you get a second invitation the following year. So there you go. They've changed it now. So new awardees are invited to the conference. They just updated this PowerPoint. So I think maybe I did ask this question before. New awardees, you get to come during the fall of your first year of your award. And then you get a second invitation the following year, as long as there's space and funding available. But they pay for everything. They pay for your airline, they pay for the hotel. And every year it's either in Washington, D.C. at the National Academies. The first day on Friday is at the National Academies office, and the second day is at the hotel, or it's in California at UC Irvine, because the National Academies was gifted a building on their campus. And so they use that building for the conference as well. The Beckman Center. And so you go to Irvine every other year. We occasionally have it someplace different. So we have been to Puerto Rico in the past. And we've actually, for some reason, we were in New Mexico once, but every other conference has always either been at the National Academy site in Washington, D.C., or at the Beckman Center, which is another National Academy site at UC Irvine. So people that can apply for this fellowship have to be either U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, permanent residents, or you have to have been granted deferred status under DACA. You can be an asylee, you can have been granted protected status and be a refugee. And so and any Indigenous individuals that are exercising their rights associated with the Jay Treaty of 1794. So all of those folks are able to apply for the fellowship program. International students, if you don't have a permanent residency or you have not been naturalized as a US citizen and do not have any of the other protected statuses, cannot apply. You have to show superior academic achievement. So you have to give grade point average, things like that. You talk about your honors and other kinds of things. And you have to show a commitment to a career in teaching and research at a college or university in the United States. So that piece is really important. The idea is that we are going to diversify the academy. And so how do we do that? You can't do that as well if you're not actually in academia. So you have to show a commitment in your application materials to a career at a university or college in the United States. That means any kind of university or college. That means community college. That means an institution that is a liberal arts, small liberal arts school, a big liberal arts school, or any kind of university, from a big school like USC to something that's smaller and only has undergraduates and or master students. So any kind of college or university in the United States. You can't have already gotten a doctoral degree at any time in any field. And if you're applying this year, so for this particular cohort, you would have to be, as of the fall of 2022, be enrolled in an eligible research-based program that leads to either a PhD or a PsyD degree at a nonprofit US institution. And you have to have 3 years of study to complete that PhD or PsyD. And the support currently is $27,000 for the pre-docs for 3 years. If you are already a graduate student and you don't have 3 years left, you can apply for a dissertation fellowship. You can't have had a doctoral degree yet. You have to be in a research-based dissertation, required program that also leads to a PhD or PsyD. And by the beginning of December of this year, all department and institutional requirements for the degree, except for writing and the defense of the dissertation, have to be complete. So you have to be able to complete your dissertation in 2022-2023 academic year. So you have to be ready to be writing already next fall. And the support for that is a single year of $28,000 stipend, of course, with the conference, et cetera. And then postdocs, if you're close to finishing, postdocs are those individuals that you've already completed a PhD or about to complete the PhD. You know, you've already thinking your schedule this year, and you can't have gotten it any earlier than 2014. So December 9th, 2014, no later than December 9th, 2021, in order to apply for the postdoctoral fellowship. And that fellowship is $50,000 and it's a single year. So it's not like if you're in a science like biology or nanoscience or one of the others that typically require a postdoc to get a job, then a lot of times you need more than 1 year, but this is a single year of stipend. There are a lot of different fields that are eligible for study. It's anything that requires you to do a research-based PhD or PsyD. So you have to be putting in a dissertation. So the sciences, technology, engineering, math, social sciences, humanities, and education. If it is a practice-oriented degree and doesn't lead to a career in teaching and academia, then that's an ineligible field. You also it can't be an MD, it can't be a law degree, et cetera. So when you're applying for this fellowship, there are, like many fellowships, you have to submit your grades, you have to provide sort of a CV kind of thing, a resume kind of thing of what have you done, what kinds of skills do you have, et cetera. But you also have to provide a personal statement. And the personal statement is really important because the personal statement allows the reviewers to understand how you as an individual are going to be able to do the things that the fellowship is asking of you. So you need to talk about how you have a capacity to respond in productive ways to students and their learning needs. You have to be able to talk about how you have a personal engagement with communities that are underrepresented in the academy and can bring that as an asset to your job in the academy in teaching and mentoring and learning and community engagement when you are a faculty member at an institution. And you need to be able to talk about how diversity of human experiences can be used in whatever discipline that you have as an educational resource for students that you are going to be teaching. If you have membership in one or more of the groups whose representation in the American professoriate has been severe and long, you need to tell us that because that's a positive factor. And you need to talk about what you have done in the past, what you're doing currently in terms of working with groups that have not been represented well in the academy. So that things like tutoring and mentoring students that are in challenging environments, leadership and organizational skills that have benefited a larger community. Maybe you've participated in housing or public service projects. All of those things are important to include in that personal statement because it helps to show that you have a real commitment to individuals who have longstanding challenges. That's the big, let me just reiterate, this personal statement is the really big thing. If you're applying to a bunch of different fellowships, this piece is what's going to have to be tailored for this particular fellowship. Because if you're applying for a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and you just take everything that you wrote there and submitted it to Ford, we read those, you're unlikely to have, to score very highly because those don't ask you about diversity and equity and inclusion. They don't ask you, what have you done with these communities in the past? You really have to be able to address that in the personal statement. You also have to tell people about your previous research and scholarly productivity. So any experiences that you have had in terms of research qualify. So if it's been a class and you had to do a research project, maybe as a group or as a single person in a class, that works. Internships, if you've done summer research programs, that's great. If you've been working and then you came back to school and your employment had to do with research, that works, right? You want to make sure that we know that you have some experience and that you understand what getting a graduate degree looks like, okay? You want to be able to tell people what you did. So these are the things that I did. This is how we did it. This is what the outcome was. This is what I personally did. Because a lot of people say, oh, I was part of a research project and we did this big thing, right? But they never tell me what you personally did and what you learned from that experience. So you want to make sure that comes out in that statement of previous research. If you are working on your dissertation, you're going to have to give dissertation progress, et cetera. If you are, you want to make sure that you talk about the impact that research may have had, both in the field as well as on you, and how that might have impacted your trajectory moving forward, okay? If you haven't done formal research, you need to talk about what kinds of things have you done that have given you skills that will be help you prepare to do your research, and what are you thinking about when you get to graduate school or between now and graduate school about what you are going to be doing to be sure that you have the skills you need, at least to start off with, right? And you also want to make sure that if you had any publications or presentations, then that means if your institution or your department has an undergraduate research conference or a single day where people can do presentations, that counts, okay? It doesn't have to be a regional or a national meeting. It can be something that happened on campus. So you want to make sure that you talk about those presentations. And if you were, an author on a publication, put that in there. If you're not an author on a publication, but somebody has acknowledged you, I wouldn't list it as a publication, but I'd make sure that you put it in the narrative about what you did in your research. And then you also have to propose a plan of research that you are going to be doing as part of this fellowship. We are giving money to you, okay? We are not giving money for that proposal. That's one thing to remember, because some people that apply are seniors in college. Some people that apply are first-year graduate students. Some people that apply are much further along. And so we're going to look at that and understand you may not have even, this is what you want to do, but you haven't been accepted into a graduate program yet. So you don't really know exactly what you're going to do. So you want to make sure that you talk about it as clearly as possible, and talk about a realistic timeline in terms of what you hope to be able to do, complete that plan, and how that will fit into your long range plans in terms of getting the career, getting the job that you want down in the future, and how it relates to the larger community and society as a whole, right? But you want to be really concise and say all of that, but be concise and specific and really be clear, especially if you are further along, to avoid excess jargon, because we tend to talk in all these acronyms and act as if people understand it. So I review for the program, and I review for biomedical sciences. I am by training a physiologist, a reproductive physiologist, but I read things that are neuroscience, and I read things that are at the interface, and depending upon the year, the interface between plants and how they may affect certain physiological processes. And, the reality is I'm smart. I've been doing this a long time, but I may not be really well-versed in the area of research that you plan to be working in. And so I need to be able to understand it. So it's not like you're having to explain it to somebody that doesn't understand science, but you have to be able to explain it to somebody that isn't necessarily in that very narrow area that you are used to talking to people about it. And if you're a postdoc, you also have to have the host institution should be different than your own. And if you want it to be the same, you're going to have to give an explanation for that. You also need to make sure that they are going to have a letter that supports you coming to them. Okay. Weirdly, the dissertation and postdocs all require annotated bibliographies. there are many disciplines that I don't even know what that means. I can tell you that every year when I first started doing this, I was like, why are we asking this of biologists? We've never done this, but it's actually really interesting and very helpful. It is your bibliography, and there's like 2-3 sentences for these 10 key sources in your bibliography that tell me essentially what that paper was about. So, and how they shape the current problem that you're going to be studying. So it's really interesting. And actually I learn a lot from it. And those are a lot of times I go, oh, I need to go read that paper. So I don't know what it's used for in history or in philosophy or in education, but it's really helpful when you get to read them as a biologist, because we don't normally do that kind of thing. You'll be submitting transcripts, a verification of your doctoral degree status form if you're already in a program, letters of recommendation, and if you're a postdoc, a host letter that says you can come to our institution. Okay. Transcripts have to be in when you submit. The letters of recommendation, I have a later deadline than the actual application process does. Unofficial transcripts are fine, okay? Because once you get an award, they're going to make you submit your actual transcripts. So it's okay if you're downloading something from your current website. For pre-docs and dissertation fellows, the transcripts need to show all your coursework, and when you got your bachelor's degree, okay? Postdocs have to show all the courses that you took and the award date for your PhD or your PsyD. You have to have an advisor or department chair have a letter that says, yes, you are in this program, and yes, you have 3 years left that you can get funding for if you're already in a program. If you are a senior, you don't have to worry about that. But if you are already in a graduate program, you have to have that verification form. And then you also are going to have to put names of individuals that are going to write you letters and get them to actually do that. So you're going to put them in with emails, and then the system will send them a link, and they will upload their letters in the system. 3 are required. It's really encouraged that you ask 5 people to do letters, because invariably somebody is going to have a problem. Maybe there's something that happens, they've forgotten. You want to make sure that you have those 3 letters, because the folks that are reviewing do look at those letters, and you want to talk to the recommenders, okay? You want the recommenders to understand what this fellowship is about and let them know, these are the things that I have done and am doing currently that relate to the very specific piece about diversity, equity, and inclusion in this fellowship. Because if they can and they know about it, they can add that to the letter. And that's really important, because, you know, people will apply for this and want to be able to say, hey, you know, I really think it's important. I've never done anything, but I have this future idea about doing something. And so if you've never talked about that with your recommenders, and no one can actually, you know, sort of essentially back up the fact that you think this is important, because if you think it's important, then hopefully you've been talking to people about it, then it becomes off as you wrote this just to be able to try to apply to this fellowship. And we really want people that are committed to this. So letting your recommenders know is really important. And then of course, again, with postdocs, you have to have a host letter. So things to do: register on the application website so that you can download all the information that you need, that you're going to have in order to be able to submit your applications. Read all the materials and the instructions that are available on the program website. There's lots of helpful resources on the website. You also have access to all of the liaisons across the country. Reach out if you have any questions about it. Read the applicant FAQ. You need to be consistent in your narrative part. So, you know, if I was a graduate, if I'm an undergraduate or a graduate student, and my graduate advisor, especially in areas that you come in and work in somebody's lab and they have funding already, maybe they had a grant, and they've given you that grant to read. You're going to do a part of it. If what you write sounds like their grant, and then what you write about your personal statement sounds like somebody else wrote it, it's really hard to know how much of that you really understand and what it is that you know about this particular research. And so you want to make sure that it's clear that all of the materials that you have uploaded are yours, okay? And you want to proofread the essays, because it's really, so we're reading a lot of essays, right? We're reading a lot of materials when we're doing this. Some of it's offsite. So come January, I am going to be the chair of the biological sciences section, biomedical sciences section, because we've taken ecology over to a different group. And we're going to do the training with everybody, and then we're going to start reading them. Everybody gets 3 reads, from at least 3 reads from everybody, from somebody on this committee. And there's probably 35 people on the committee. We take the time to read them. And as you're reading them, you want to make sure that nothing in there is going to say, why couldn't they have read this and made it easier for me, right? Because I'm going to be reading a lot of them. And then once we get past that first part, we show up virtually now this year, and we're going to spend 2 days reviewing everybody again to make sure that you get that 3rd read, that those who have differences across, two of the 3 don't really match up, get another read. Those that have moved to the top may get another read as we move along, so that we can figure out where they rank. It's really tough when you're reading that many applications not to start saying, wow, you don't want to give anybody a reason to say, I'm not going to support this one as much as this other one. It may have nothing to do with it. We understand that's a bias, but it does affect people. So try to make sure that you've made it as easy as possible for me to read. Have white space in it. That's really important. Make it easy to follow. And make sure that other people have read it, because when I write things, I think it makes perfect sense. And then I give it to the person in my office and I say, can you read over this? And invariably there is something that I thought made perfect sense and it doesn't make perfect sense. So advisors, mentors, other students that that you think write well, or that you hope will be able to understand it, make sure that they read that, so that you have the opportunity to, if you do it early enough, you're going to have the opportunity to take that draft and then make it better, okay? You want to make sure you contact your letter writers, give them a draft of your research proposal, give them a draft of the kinds of other supplementary materials that you're going to add, so that they know they want to have stuff that goes with that. And make sure that you've uploaded everything by the deadline, and make sure that your letter writers can submit their letter by the deadline. So you'll be able to tell if they have or they haven't, and you can follow up with them. You want to be as positive as possible. So you want to monitor those, but you don't want to overwhelm somebody with a bunch of emails saying, hey, did you do this? I don't see that you've done this. You want to make sure that you contact them as it's getting closer. Ask them at the beginning, I'm going to put your name in. This is the deadline. Can you do it? Can you write me a good letter? And how often, if I see that 2 weeks before the deadline, you haven't submitted it, would you like me to contact you? And, I can contact you 14 days out, 7 days out. Would that be good for you? For me, that's really helpful, because I know that I have to do it. It's on my mind. It's on my list of things to do, but there are fires that come up beforehand, and then it keeps getting pushed down, and it needs to make sure that it's at the top because it's coming due. You want to make sure everything is completed. You want to make sure you save all of your documents as separate PDF files. Make sure that you've looked to see what the page limitations are and the file sizes before you upload it, because it can screw up in multiple ways. And then make sure you look at them, because we always get some that look like a page is missing or something happened. And so clearly the upload didn't happen, and they didn't look to make sure that it was all correct. The deadlines for pre-docs are December the 16th, 5 p.m. Dissertation and postdocs are earlier. They're December the 9th. All supplemental materials, that means letters of recommendation, et cetera, are due January the 6th of next year. And there are no exceptions or extensions made for any circumstances. So make sure that you know what those deadlines are, because those deadlines are final. And you can always reach out to the fellowship office. I can't help you with mechanics of the application, but I am certainly happy to help you with, should I be adding this? What can I look at? And if you need somebody else to review it, I can always try to find one of authorities to look at it, myself or somebody else. And we're happy to do that. So.
Thank you so much for that. So while we go into preparing some questions for Dr. Hewitt, I'm just like going to take a moment here to briefly share how the National Fellowships Office can help you as you're working on your Ford application. So feel free to type questions in the chat here while you're thinking about things, but I'm going to share my screen here so that you can all see how to get in contact with National Fellowships. You can send me an email if you have questions. I'm happy to talk. You can also set up a meeting one-on-one to either talk through the application process and the things you're going to need for that, to elaborate on anything that you've learned today here, or to get feedback on a draft of any of the components of the application that we learned about here. For grad students, you can see there's a link in Calendly, grad fellowships. Undergraduates, you can sign up and navigate, find involvement and engagement, and then look for National Fellowships advising. We also have a number of faculty members on campus who have had one of the various Ford fellowships. I saw that Professor Todd Shaw was here, and that's so great. Professor Shaw is a great resource, and everyone here has agreed to be willing to help answer questions. If you have specific questions and you'd like to talk with somebody who has had experience with Ford at various stages in their career. So please feel free to reach out to me, to National Fellowships, to members of our Ford committee, to any of the resources that Dr. Hewitt has shared here as well. But I want to make sure we have plenty of time to answer the questions that you might have for her here. So I will stop my share. Well, if no one has a question just yet, I can start us off here and see if you might be able to think of anything else. You mentioned that the commitment to teaching is a really important part of this fellowship, and I'm curious for applicants who perhaps maybe haven't had as many opportunities in their graduate program to be involved in some sort of formal teaching experience. Are there things that they can do to prepare for that, or other experiences that they can look to that might be useful as they talk about that sort of commitment in their applications?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important that you just talk about the fact that you are committed to working at an institution of higher education, that you know, there are different kinds of institutions. So how much you teach is going to vary from place to place, and how much you may have done previously is going to vary. So whatever those experiences might be, so maybe you've done some tutoring, maybe you, maybe you realize that while teaching is something that you enjoy, but it's not going to be the focus, but you're going to be doing, you really want to focus on your research and teaching students in your research. So you can talk about mentoring and how that is teaching in your research. Just that you have a commitment to that is the important piece, that you're committed to being in academia, that you're committed to utilizing, your knowledge to be able to help bring others through the process so that we can change the face of the academy.
Great.
And I'm happy to defer to Dr. Shaw if he has anything to add to those. You're muted.
Oh, I think you're muted.
The phrase of 2021.
Yeah.
So, my experience has been in terms of being both a Ford Fellow. So I was a postdoctoral fellow, and then I've also served on the Ford panel on a couple of instances, and that was quite enlightening. Yeah, I think to be able to, it is quite important to address each part of the application and give as much of the full attention to each part of the application as you possibly can, because when it comes down to trying to sort through many excellent prospects and many excellent candidates, if someone has sort of an outstanding sort of set of prospective research or doctoral research they may engage in, you know, or their research component as is required by the fellowship they're applying to is very well done, but they've really kind of not done as well as others in making a case about how they intend to be a part of the future professorate. I don't want to say that this eliminates one, but you're not making your best case. And so really kind of thinking very directly about each of those components, including, of course, the intent of the fellowship, which is to diversify the future professoriate. That's quite key. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. You'll read some and you're thinking there are a lot of excellent research proposals that come through. Mm-hmm. But the personal statement is in many cases going to elevate you to the top of that group, because the fellowship is really targeted for that, right? You are going to be competing with a lot of really, really good people. You want to make sure that you provide the information that brings you up to the top. Mm-hmm. And that defines how you are different, right? Mm-hmm. I see that there are some questions in here, and I will be perfectly candid with you. I am not a social scientist, so I can only give you a broad response to the question, have you found that in social sciences preference tends to be given to specific methodological approaches? I tend to go to a lot of non-biological presentations because this is a great conference in the fact that it's not just in my area, so I get to go learn a lot of things that I will tell you that, frankly, when I graduated from undergraduate, I was very narrowly focused I had a bachelor's degree in microbiology and a bachelor's degree in human biology. And most of my, courses that I took, and the reason I ended up with 2 degrees is because all the electives that I took were outside in another science, right? And so I didn't take philosophy, and I didn't take art history, and I didn't take, all these, I was required to take one anthropology course, I think. So I took it, but I don't really have a broad base beyond that. So I go to these, and from that perspective, I hear all kinds of different methodologies used across all of these different areas. But when I hear people talk about it, whatever your methodology is, it has to be the correct methodology for your particular research project. That's what counts. It's that you're doing the right thing for your research project.
Yeah, agreed. I think maybe part of the implication of Dave's question is within each field or within each discipline, there's often, well, in the social sciences, let me be key, there's a discussion about sort of that quantitative versus qualitative debate about, approaching questions. And so keep in mind that these Ford panels are diverse and quite balanced, balanced in the sense they're individuals with very varied backgrounds who are senior researchers, scholars, professors sitting on these panels. And so, yes, I completely agree, Dr. Hewitt. You want to make the strong case for the questions that you would ask within your discipline. If anthropologists approach this question by these set of methodologies, or you're doing something unique, you want to make a case, and that's a good thing. Now we're looking at this question that has not been asked before, and we're using some tools that have not been employed before. That is just fine, I think. But I fully agree with her. It's just you make a good case for why this is a good set of tools to unpack and to provide evidence for the questions that you might ask.
Thank you. Somebody asked the timeline, are you allowed to conduct some of your dissertation work on the fellowship? I assume you mean on the pre-doc fellowship? So
no, because I remember you said that the last year was used for writing, and I was wondering.
Oh, no. Yeah, you can still do some of the work. Yes.
Okay, because so like I have an intervention and plus some qualitative work. So coming out of the summer, I'll still be doing interviews. So is there like a budget that we have to fill out, or is it kind of
a timeline? You need to make sure you clarify your timeline, that it isn't going to, that you will be able to complete your dissertation by the end of the fellowship year.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what you want to make clear.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then somebody asked about international students. So international students that are not DACA, asylees, refugees, or under some other umbrella that allows you to be here for another reason must be naturalized citizens or permanent residents. Yes, that is key. So international students that are here because they have refugee status or are DACA or are an asylee, they can apply. They have to document that, but they can apply. But if you came to the US and you are here on a visa that is that a J1 visa, then you have to, you cannot apply. And I realize that you may not know what questions to ask because you haven't looked at it very carefully. You just heard me provide you with a ton of information really quickly here. So feel free to reach out to me after the talk. You know, if you have something a week from now, 2 weeks from now, you want to ask, I'm certainly available. I know you probably got my email address before, but that's my email address. How many people apply? Lots. I can't remember. I know that we fund not very different than NSF. So it's about 6% of applicants are actually awarded an award. But if you don't apply, you definitely won't get it. So I always tell people, please apply. You know, we get lots of applications. So we fund 125 or 130 every year. Depends on how much the Ford Foundation provides funding for about 124 people, I believe. But the fellows have over the years provided funding for extra fellowships. So there's always a few more than what is paid for by the Ford Foundation. So we have, if that, you know, that translates into about 6,000 or something, 8,000 applicants every year for those positions.
I have a story to share very briefly that the year that I received my postdoctoral fellowship, the previous year, my very good friend who's exactly in the same field I'm in, looking at some of the same research questions applied and didn't receive it. And so in some respects, you know, I puzzled about it, but I knew that there's also this factor of the cohort in which you apply. You know, he and I had I think we both had excellent research and excellent prospects, but sometimes there's sometimes a bit of a cohort effect. So you never know what it is. And so for whatever set of reasons, you know, I was given a green light that year that he didn't receive the previous year. But again, had I said, well, he didn't receive it, so I won't, you know, I wouldn't have received it. So yeah, you just definitely have to apply.
I can jump in here too as well, and maybe Dr. Hewitt can elaborate on this, but from colleagues of mine in graduate fellowship advising other institutions, I know that many people have had success applying for it a second time, especially at the pre-doctoral level, because you're still eligible as long as you have at least 3 more years there. So I'm not sure if Dr. Hewitt or Dr. Shaw have any comments to say about that, but that's something that I've heard as well too.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, you will, I don't know if you have to request it. It used to be you had to request your comments, but you can reach out and say, hey, I would like to request the comments that the committee provided for my application. And then you can take a look at those, incorporate whatever they have said to you and apply again. I do know that we have people that get an honorable mention or applied the year before, and people will go, I think I've read, there have been ones that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've read this before. And if they didn't get an honorable mention, you're never really sure, because maybe you read one that was very similar or something like that. But you do see that, they get better, right? And then many of those end up rising up to the top. And if you don't get it and you get an honorable mention, while it's disappointing, I think it's really an important thing that you are able to share with other prospects as you're going forward in your career. But also, being able to apply for these things gives you a lot of skills in the writing of application materials for future grants and proposals that you're going to probably need to do. So I think that even just the mechanics of going through it are helpful to individuals. And then please ask for those comments if they don't send them back to you, so that you can see what it was. Was it that I wasn't clear? Was it that it was too many acronyms? What did I not? There are things that you can do to make your writing better in everything that you do as you move forward. So I think it's a great learning experience. And I hate to say that, like somehow, we don't think that you're going to get this award. I hope that you do, but I do think that it's an excellent opportunity to learn as well.
Yeah, I have yet another story, which is I did apply for the pre-dissertation fellowship and didn't receive it. So, but again, I took those lessons from not receiving to apply to the postdoctoral, and I was successful. So yeah, I'm a witness to the idea of keep at it. Over time, you pick up those skills that make you more competitive and are helpful down the road.
We're getting near the end of our time here, but does anyone have a final question before we wrap things up?
Again, feel free to reach out after the fact. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I look forward to hopefully hearing that you all have applied.
And I will be following up with an email to those of you who provided information with some additional links and just reiterating the information you have here. But please join me in a virtual round of applause to Dr. Hewitt, and also thank you to Professor Todd Shaw for joining us as well and lending his wisdom and experience. So this has really been great, and I appreciate both of you taking the time to join us and really shed some light on a really great opportunity that I hope all of you here will seriously consider applying for.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's nice to see you, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Hewitt.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.